right, hello everybody, and today I'm excited. My guest is Shawna Lee. She is a keynote poet, legacy designer, educator, speaker, and author of the book Juicy Gems, Never Doubt Yourself Again. She is also the CEO for PRISM of Transformation. Shawna, welcome to the School Rules Podcast. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this educational platform. I'm excited. Thank you.
Great. Thank you
Doing
so
great.
much for being here. So, Shawna, before we get started, I just want to let's talk about you. Okay.
Okay.
Tell me about your mission, what you do to empower women. I see your background there, educate, empower, modeling motherhood. So tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about your success and what you're doing right now.
So I've been in the educational space for since 2000. I started out as a substitute in my children's school, and then I decided in being a part of the environment, that's when I discovered and I felt like that was the place for me to be. Education was my space. So I started going to school. I was a cosmetology instructor, but I started going to school to be to get on the educational track. But halfway through, when I was about to get to my bachelor's degree, I asked myself, do I really want to be in the classroom my entire life? And then I switched to human services. However, I did remain as an educator in the preschool Head Start setting for over 10 years. Then I became a life coach. Then I moved into mentor coaching for teachers. And that's what I'm doing now, along with my passion project, which is the Modeling Motherhood program, where I focus on helping young mothers to really hone in on their self and personal and professional development, as well as look at life not from a place of having to struggle and strive and just be in a place of I want to say deficit, because I feel I was a young mother of 4 by 24. So that's where I'm coming from as the passion for young mothers. I want them to know that they can thrive, not just survive.
So, this seems to be like a constant conversation about propelling women into leadership positions and pushing women forward. And that's kind of our mission here at Texas Women's. We want to do that. In fact, just the last 10 years, we've had 2 women run for president. And even though they weren't successful, we still want to empower women and propel them into those positions. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing to help us with that. How can we remedy this issue to get more women the confidence to be in those leadership roles?
Well, I think one of the major thing is most women feel like they have to compete. And I think when we begin to compete instead of looking to thrive from a place of contribution, then we take our energy that could be focused on really building our confidence and building the confidence of our sisters. We kind of dilute ourselves, and then we don't give ourselves enough credit, I think, as well, to know that we can accomplish all the things we set out to do. And not only that, that we can all win. I don't have to win and you lose. You don't have to win and I lose. We can win together. And we just have to hone in on what our gifts are and how we contribute to the whole instead of separating it.
My work here at Texas Women's is to train future school leaders for our school districts, for our school campuses. So do me a favor, take some time and teach me something, okay? What kind of messages should I be sending along to my students to prepare that next generation of women and diverse leaders for all of our leadership roles?
I believe that for the first place we can really go is, instead of looking outside for answers, we should go within ourselves. I think we have enough noise outside of us that tell us we should go in this direction, go in that direction. But I think the focus is, what do I want as a woman? What do I want to focus on? Because like I said, we've been told from a young age that we should, go in this direction or go in that direction. But I think we really don't know ourselves. What is my unique contribution to the world? And that really will change everything if we will take the time to find out what truly matters to us instead of piggybacking off of other people's mission and vision. Not that we can't support that, but I think if we come from a place of our unique contribution, then we have more to offer to the whole.
And so how can we do that? What can we do to explore that further, to go within our excels? What do you recommend to your in your trainings and your talks to do that? What's the best way to go about that?
Well, the best way is, first of all, leaders are readers. That's how I feel. So take the time to, I will say, journal. That's my number one go-to. Journal. Take time to write down, where have I been? Where am I now? Where do I want to go? And then from that perspective, then begin to map out specifically, what do I need to get to my next step? Because if I don't know where I'm going, then I can be drawn in any direction. So I think clarity of purpose, and taking the time to really decide on being unique instead of trying to fit in all the time. I think if we realize that sometimes we are meant to stand out, and that takes courage.
And there is a lot of power in journaling and writing down your thoughts and then going back and processing that part of your life. I think that's a powerful advice to give. So, and as a part of this, your mission is to build confidence in women, right? You're working to do that. What's the most challenging part of this work that you're finding? What are the traits that are lacking to help build this movement and this strategy for the women you work with?
The biggest thing I feel is the competition part of it. We're always looking at someone else to decide who we're supposed to be. And I think if we, as women, we really take the time to know ourselves. I mean, I can't say that enough, really. If we don't take the time to know ourselves, to figure out what we want, and I can give you a personal story. I'm originally from Guyana, South America.
Okay.
And before I got here, I was a very outgoing person. I was a part of, I came here at the end of high school, and I was a part of a lot of different things. And when I came to America, I became a people pleaser. And I shrink back, for some reason, the spotlight wasn't, I felt like I didn't fit in anymore. I felt like I had to stand behind someone. And so for me, it took me at least 20 years to get back to just being okay with knowing that I am meant to shine. I'm not meant to stand behind somebody else. And because I shine doesn't mean I take somebody else's light. And there's enough for all of us to get what we want and succeed. And success for everybody looks differently. So I had to get back in the mode of, again, going within myself. What part of me, what's missing? What do I feel is missing from me? And why do I feel like I need to step back versus stand out? And I think in leadership, it's all about knowing that I can lead and I can follow as well. And sometimes we take turns based on our skill level.
So, you have this challenge of coming to America from Guyana and being a part of a different culture. What's leadership for women seen like in your country? How is that viewed compared to America?
Well, leadership, when I left, which was in the late 90s, women were still homemakers to a degree. So, and I mean, I went back for the second time actually last October, and women are taking on a lot of leadership roles. But when I left, leadership for women was more in the home versus in public places.
Now, if you don't mind, I want to shift gears. I want to talk about mental health for a moment, because mental health is near and dear to my heart. It's part of my research agenda here at Texas Women's. So how do you address mental health challenges for the people that you work with?
Well, I spend most of my time at work mentoring teachers. So I'm finding that mental health has become a large part of what I do. My focus, I'm hired to focus on implementing curriculum and teacher-child interaction. And at one of my evaluations, my boss said to me, don't spend too much time on personal things. And I had to say to her, if the teachers don't feel, if they walk into the classroom and there's something bothering them, I want to be able, when I meet with them, even though I know the agenda is to focus on teacher-child interaction, curriculum implementation, everything about the classroom, I have to focus on the person first. We don't begin to teach our children before we feed them, because we don't know where they're coming from. We don't know whether they had a meal. And I take that approach with the teachers that I serve as well. I don't try to talk about curriculum and teacher-child interaction without first getting, even if I'm spending an hour with them, if the first 15 minutes is spent on mental health. How are you feeling? How are things working out for you? Get some personal things in there, then we can focus on the bigger part, because in order for them to be able to be successful, I believe, in the classroom, then we have to be able to think from a holistic standpoint, not just the school and the classroom environment, but the teacher's personal life as well.
But mental health is continues to be a challenge for so many to even have that conversation. So
Yes.
so as a guest and as an awesome guest on the show, this is your chance to, what advice do you have for my audience regarding confidence, education, leadership, empowering, all the things that you're working on? Well, what advice do you have for folks that are coming into these leadership roles that are going to be in the next generation of great, awesome leaders in our schools?
I would say confidence comes from doing, not just saying I want to be confident. We have to, it's like a process. We have to think of it like a process. And if I want to be confident, then I need to ask myself how. The first thing I would say, think about a person that you admire. What makes you admire that person? And sometimes we don't have, I know a lot of times, sometimes I didn't have the language to, I know what I wanted, but I didn't know how to express it. So I would say maybe borrow some confidence from someone else, someone that you really admire. If confidence, I feel, is something that you wear, it's not it's not an act all the time, but it's something that you wear. I think what you put on helps with confidence. I think making sure that you feel confident in your clothing, that means you will speak more confidently. I believe that. I believe your what you say, how you take time to make sure you know and understand your field, that also helps with confidence. Putting yourself in environments where you can learn from other people, that helps with confidence. And if I had to give one more, I would say don't be afraid to compliment other people. That is confidence.
Shawna, this has been an amazing conversation, and I want to thank you. But first, you need to tell us what's next for you, and what are you working on in the new year of 2025?
Well, I'm actually doing a pilot program because I work with mothers young mothers between the ages of 18 and 35. And right now I have a pilot program that I started a couple weeks ago, and it's from the book that what every parent needs to know. So that's going to it's going to be 3 phases of that. And I have 6 mothers that are working in that program with me right now. And then also I have an ebook as well as a mastermind coach course that I'm launching. And it's called From Pieces to PEACE, and how we can go from picking up the pieces of our lives to actually moving into having inner peace which helps with our confidence. It helps with our leadership. It helps with our mental health. It helps with every aspect of our lives, and we can move forward confidently in the direction of our dreams.
Well, tell us, how can we contact you? How can we reach out to you for more information?
My I am on LinkedIn as Shawna Halley, Halley. I'm going to switch that as soon as we get off to Shawna Lee. I am on Facebook as Shawna Halley Lee, and I'm also my website is www.prismoftransformation.com. That's www.prismoftransformation.com. And if you don't mind, can I end with a poem? Who told you who you are? You were given labels and you were given names. Shame, blame, and games kept you marred with pain. I want you to throw off those labels and throw off those names. I want you to step back into eternity, resume the life you knew before the labels and before the names. It's time for you to state, I will not be defined. I will not be contained. I will not submit to a life of restraint and constant retrograde. You see, because a woman who knows her worth is like a golden nugget that never loses its luster. A woman who's guided from within is like a lighthouse you can trust to show you the way to honor the God, the goddess within. A woman who needs no outer approval to feel joy is like a rose that blooms every hour on the hour. A woman who shares her love is like the universe say, I know and accept that we are one. And a woman who's satisfied with her life is like a magnet that draws to it love, light, beauty, simplicity, and clarity in each and every moment. We are that women. We are those women. Let's celebrate the truth of who we are in this very hour. Thank you so much, Jerry.
That was so. So I want to talk a little bit now about transformational leadership. Now, when you think of leaders, generally the great ones that come to mind are likely transformational leaders. These are the individuals that they're visionary. They've got a clear path that they want to take, a compelling vision. It's inspiring. They motivate their followers. And their vision is so inspiring and just amazing that followers are just compelled to go forth and help with that vision because they're so great at communicating that vision because they just in their mind they see it so clearly. Transformational leaders are also very caring. They care about the individual, not just the vision, but the people that are part of whatever it is that they're trying to do in the organization or whatever the vision is. The transformational leader understands that the individual people and their needs, the followers, are going to be part of that. So they have a genuine concern for individuals. They also tend to be brilliant. They're very, very smart people, intellectually smart, maybe well educated, maybe even educated with the streets. But it doesn't, wherever that is, it's part of that intellectual capacity is their creativity, their ability to change a narrative and the way things are thought about or approached, asking those critical questions, or maybe even making statements that just make you think a little bit differently. Because again, these folks are very good, amazing communicators, and because of that, they're inspirational. They're people that you can look up to, you can look to for for making change happen or moving an organization forward. And because of that, as you can see how these things are connected, they have influence. There are lots of people that fall into this category, and if you were to Google transformational leader, you'll see a list of people that are considered transformational, and that's why they're called that. And you think about it, transformational, these are individuals who are poised to transform an organization to move forward. And this one, while leadership obviously is a learned trait, otherwise we wouldn't have entire degrees on it, and amazing books. People can learn to be leaders. You can learn to be a leader. But transformational leaders, it's almost like the upper echelon of leadership. And these individuals have a talent for it because of all of these qualities, to be visionary and to care about individuals and have that inspirational, communicative capacity about them. So when we talk about transformational leadership, and I'm sure you have someone in mind that you're already thinking about, we juxtapose it with another term called transactional leadership, which I hesitate to call it the opposite of transformational leadership because it's not exactly an opposite, but transactional leadership sort of emphasizes the need to keep things the way that they are. They don't focus as much on the relationship that transformational leaders do. These are folks that they have a set of established goals, and we're just going to meet those goals because they probably meet the needs of that individual leader. They don't meet the needs of the many, they meet the needs of the few or the individual. It's very a quid pro quo kind of relationship. You give for me, I give back for you. And a lot of, before we really started to study leadership as a trait, many of our governments and our corporations are sort of operated on a transactional model. You give, I give, you show up and give time, I give you money, or you show up and vote, and then I take care of you. You can kind of see how there are some governments that were sort of set up on a transactional model. And there are a lot of leaders in the world today that still believe in a transactional model. But true great leadership is rooted in a transformational sort of style of leadership that, if anything, we may not be able to fully attain it for some of us because, again, some of the great leaders of the world that we know in our history books that we've even built statues to and monuments and have museums for, these individuals are truly transformational. So I encourage you to Google that term, just to get a sense for who are we talking about, and then read about that person, read about that individual and the things that they did in their lives that would serve them as a transformational leader. I was having lunch with my son the other day, and we were talking a little bit about his volunteer work that he does on the weekends. It's not every weekend. It's kind of a once-a-month thing where actually he and his mother go and work with our local school districts, and they do a food pantry sort of giveaway. And families drive up, and they pick up much-needed food and supplies, and they go about their day. And this is kind of a once-a-month charity thing that my son does for school and does for a school district, and his mom works with him on the charity. So we were talking about how they've been doing this for a while, and recently they've sort of changed the format. You never really know what kind of food you're going to get. It's donated from the local food pantry, and so there's tables that have to be set up, and there's boxes of food and bags, and there's sort of this known but unknown distribution system of giving out food, bagging up the food, moving pallets, boxes, getting the materials and the foods to the families as they drive up, and so on. And so, they have volunteers that rotate through constantly, and it's run by a local organization, but there's not this training, and there's not this, it's just a community thing that happens, and those who do it kind of know how to do it, and those who don't sort of have to figure it out. And so being the, Dr. Burkett, that I am, and I ask, so what happens when there's an absence of leadership? What happens when there's no designated person to step in and just sort of teach others how to do it? And so he thought about it for a minute, and he was just like, well, I just kind of go and do what I need to do. I've done doing it before, and so I know what I enjoy doing, and I know what has to be done, so I just kind of get in and do it, and then others sort of fall in line. And then my wife will chime in and she'll talk about the folks that they just kind of stand around. They're not really sure what to do, or maybe they don't have the confidence to know what to do, or maybe they're younger and they just kind of struggle with is this the right thing to do, or what's my place in this? And maybe some of them are just standing around waiting on someone to give direction, which I've noticed is sort of maybe a trend for some of our younger populations as we've moved into standardized testing, and we have a lot of people that are just waiting to be told what to do. So I had a conversation with them about this concept of initiative. Like, where's the initiative? Where's the initiative to step into a role when there's a lack of leadership? So I wanted to spend at least a segment of the podcast talking about what to look for if you're in an organization, or you're in an environment, or maybe even on a smaller scale, maybe you're on a team that has no designated leader, or the designated leader is not doing a great job, but maybe you don't know. Maybe you're in a position where you're not quite sure. So I wanted to give you some information and some tips and tricks to sort of look around and go, is this happening to me? Is there a leadership void where you are? So let's talk about that. One thing for sure, that if you're on a team that's sort of lacking some leadership, is that there'll be a true lack of direction. You'll be able to tell this pretty quickly. Like, what are we doing here? Why are we here? What's going on? There's no true termed priorities. There's no goals. There's no guidance. So one thing that I want to encourage you as you're working through your master's and doctoral programs, or just wherever you are, it's important to establish goals, and not only the goals, but benchmarks to measure your goals. So it's one thing to go, hey, we need to accomplish X, Y, and Z. That's great, but how do you know you're accomplishing X, Y, and Z? How do you know that you've got the right data in place to show that you've accomplished the goals that you set out to achieve? So one thing about education, particularly education leaders, and this has been a trend since I've been in the game, is that we talk about data-driven decision-making, data. But the data that you collect should aid and inform the goals that you set for yourself. So it's important to set benchmarks. And I'm not talking about benchmark data or standardized testing data. I'm talking about, hey, how do we know in 3 weeks we've achieved what we set out to achieve? That will show you whether or not you have a clear direction in the work that you're doing in the organization or the team that you're on. So that's one thing to look for, a lack of direction. Another thing to look for is reduced morale. Like, how we feel about working where we're working. Now, this is called climate. We talk about culture and climate, the difference between the two all the time. But this specifically addresses the climate. And climate talks about how we feel. How do we feel when we're here? Do Mondays feel like Fridays, or are we really excited for Fridays because we know we don't have to be here for the next 2, hopefully 3 days if we have a long weekend? When people start to feel like they're not appreciated, they're not valued, their ideas aren't being heard, well, most importantly, that they don't feel supported, like the work that they do, they just don't feel right about it. I can tell you time and time again, even in the research that I've done on ineffective principles, the thing that comes up constantly is people need to feel valued in the work that they're doing. They need to feel appreciated. They want to feel appreciated. I mean, sure, yeah, we all show up and we all do a job because there's going to be a paycheck at the end of the day, and none of us are doing what we're doing if we wouldn't get paid for it. That's true. But there is an altruism to the work that we do, particularly in education, and we have to feel valued in the work that we're doing. Because sometimes for some people, and the work that they're doing can be very challenging and very difficult. Take special education, for example. Imagine yourself in a classroom full of low-functioning autistic students for 8 hours a day, and they're struggling to do some of the most basic things that you think students at that age should be able to do. And there's one teacher and maybe one aide that is trying to accomplish those goals every single day, dealing with the frustrations and oftentimes the violence that comes with working with students who have those kind of challenges. They want to feel appreciated and valued, that the work that they're doing is important, and they need to be told that, and they need to be shared with them, and you need to work with them. The third thing I would look for is inefficiency. If you've got a leader in place that struggles making decisions, or maybe the decision-making process slows down and there's delays and you're waiting around, like you can't get things done because the people ahead of you can't get their things done, and you feel like you're in a position where you're constantly waiting, you might be in a situation where there's just some inefficiencies happening. Now, that could be a variety of things, inefficiencies in finance or processes or policy or bureaucracy, or there's a variety of things. But sometimes there are leaders who get confronted with difficult decisions or decision-making processes, and they just won't do it for whatever reason. And you're sitting around throwing up your hands going, this is obvious to me. This is obvious to the rest of us. Why won't you just make the decision, make the choice, hit the button, hit enter, send the email, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Just those inefficiencies of decision making and sometimes could just create a blockage in the chain and unfortunately stop the organization from getting things done. And, you could stop and think for a moment, the teams that maybe you've been on or maybe you've seen that are just kind of dealing with that inefficient, ineffective decision-making. That might be too methodical or rest with too much with one individual in order to move the organization forward. Well, this might be an opportunity to look at, is there more a collaborative team making or shared governance model that would help sort of move these efficiencies along so that we can get our jobs done? So that's sort of where you need some leadership to figure out where are the gaps, where are we struggling, where can we improve our processes and procedures? Because sometimes inefficiencies can really, really mess up your organization or even your team. The fourth thing I would look for is confusion. And this is part of the conversation that I opened up this segment with, talking about the charity with my son and my wife. Is there tends to be sometimes when they go and they work, there's a lot of confusion. There are some people that show up and they're not really sure what to do. And the reason for that is there's likely a communications breakdown somewhere. You ever been a part of a team or somewhere and you're just not really sure what you're supposed to be doing because you don't really know, like, hey, what are we doing today? Or what are we supposed to be doing? Like, is this right? Like, is this correct? And you're just kind of like waiting around. Like, we've got this thing coming up, but I don't know where's it supposed to be? What time does it start? Like, what am I supposed to do when I get there? That communication breakdown can really hinder your organization or your team. And this happens all the time. And again, back to my ineffective principal research, this is kind of another really big area that principals often struggle, is there's a communication breakdown, that sharing of information, that letting people know what they're supposed to be doing, how they're supposed to be doing it, or even just what's going on. Oftentimes there's stuff happening wherever it is that you work or whatever job that you're trying to accomplish, and no one is sharing information or giving anything out to people that they know what they're supposed to be doing. So communication is obviously very, very important in the moment. It's also important to share the right information at the right time. But that's a skill that comes much later. So if you're wondering, like, hey, what's going on here? Like, you might be a part of an organization that really struggles with good quality, clean communication. And the last one I just call it decreased innovation, meaning we're just kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again. We're not improving. We're not changing. We're not trying anything new. We're not listening to new ideas. Or maybe we're in a situation where leadership's not interested in new ideas. Like, maybe they're really happy with the status quo and they don't want to change things, because if people change things, then maybe they feel threatened by that change because there really is somebody better that could come along and take their job. This happens all the time. There are lots of insecure leaders out there that don't want to hear new ideas, or they stifle that innovation because they are fearful that they'll lose their job. Natural human response. But obviously that's not leadership. Leaders need to encourage new ideas. Leaders need to encourage innovation. They want people talking about, hey, look at these processes, look at these policies. How can we improve? Going back to what we were talking about, inefficiencies. This is a really good opportunity to listen to people and go, hey, how can we make this better? What can we do to strengthen what we're doing? How can we improve on what worked and what didn't work? That level of self-reflection is a real strong part of leadership that's often lacking, and I think it needs to be looked at. So not picking on my family's charity organization. They do a fine job. I'm very pleased with what they do. But it got me thinking about, what does that absence of leadership look like? Because in extreme cases, it looks like anarchy, where people are running around not knowing what anybody should be doing, until ultimately some person steps up and says, hey, let's take some direction here. But then you worry about, whether or not that kind of direction is the right kind of direction. So sometimes the absence of leadership can really impact an organization if it's not handled correctly. But these are just some things to be looking for when you are living in a world and an organization where there's a leadership void. Are you familiar with Keller ISD? The Keller Independent School District is a mid-sized school district located in Tarrant County. Now, Keller ISD is near and dear to my heart because while I don't live in Keller ISD, I live less than half a mile to one of its boundaries. In fact, my son should go to the school. If we went to the school that was closest to our house, it would be a Keller ISD school. But hence we live in a different district because the way boundary lines are drawn. So we don't go to that school. But I know about Keller ISD and I'm familiar with the school, and I've had friends who've worked for the district. So keeping up with the comings and goings of the Keller Independent School District is not foreign to me, as I've lived near that school district for almost 20 years. So following the latest drama in Keller ISD has actually been quite interesting. And if you haven't heard, let me give you a quick synopsis. Back in December 19th to be exact, there was some discussions about splitting up the school district. Now, if that sounds weird to you, it's because it is weird. School districts normally just don't split up. Now, there have been instances where school districts have had some financial issue or maybe even some accountability issues, and the Texas Education Agency has had to step in and divide the district or dissolve the district, especially in extreme cases, but never divide up a district. So while that seems weird, it kind of is weird, especially since Keller doesn't seem to have any major issues. Sure, school finance is a giant issue right now for a lot of schools across the state. A lot of it's driven by the fact that in the last legislative session, schools were not fully funded. And the reason why they weren't fully funded is because there was decision by the legislature and by the governor to hold back school funding because there was a push to fund school vouchers. And so the trade-off was going to be fund the voucher program, and then we will fully fund the schools as expected. So school districts did not receive the full bed of funding that they should have received in the last legislative session, and as a result, some of them are truly struggling. Now, there are some examples. Richardson ISD is one, Louisville ISD is another, where they actually had to go in and they're planning on closing schools. Now, there's a variety of reasons why. Attendance is usually one, and finances is another, but closing schools within a school district and consolidating campuses is also not a crazy concept. Now, Keller isn't doing any of those things. And while they do have some financial issues, what you should know if you're listening to this podcast and kind of following along to what happens in our schools is that this particular school board had been put into place by Patriot Mobile, who did some very intentional funding and campaigning to put specific people on the school board that they wanted in order to address issues of their concern, like transgender issues in the classroom, certain banning of books, issues that were near and dear to their hearts. So what they did was they campaigned to put school board members on their board to address those issues. Now, and while public people running school districts is not a crazy concept in Texas, in fact, that's the way it works, these are publicly elected officials who are supposed to drive the interests of the district. And I have to be honest here, as an educator, 25 years in the business, we have to do what's best for students, and we have to do what's best for teachers. And I'd have to argue that Keller ISD is not doing that in this instance. So by splitting up the district, what they're literally trying to do is divide the districts by the train tracks. Yes, the train tracks. There is a railroad that runs along a major road dividing the school district, and the road is called 377. So Highway 377 would become essentially a dividing point, and yes, the kids on the other side of the tracks would be lopped off from the district, and they will call it Alliance ISD. Now, what's sad about this is that a lot of these discussions were had behind closed doors and no community input was asked. This was just simply a board decision. The superintendent was kind of involved, but the reporting is that there were even 2 school board members that were left out of the discussions for what was happening in Keller ISD, and it happened to be the 2 school board members that live on the other side of the tracks. No consideration has been made of closing schools or consolidating schools. No consideration was made to get rid of debt. In fact, what's being discussed is that if there's any debt in the district, it's going to be left to the other side to figure out, and the more affluent side would just kind of start over fresh and clean. They would take the current school district, this current superintendent for their district, and then the other district would kind of just be left to their own accord. There are also certain people that are involved in this that would be given an opportunity to select board members for the new formed district, and the other district would just kind of be left to figure things out. And from an educational leadership point of view, which is what this podcast is about, and as I try to inform the people who watch and listen to this podcast of the things that are happening, what I have to say is when I was a principal, my driving concept of leadership was very simple. Is it good for teachers? Is it good for students? And if it wasn't, we don't do it. I can't see how these decisions that are being made are good for kids and good for teachers. And furthermore, let's add to that, is it even good for the community? Now, what's upsetting is the blind side, how this was done in discussion in closed-door meetings. It wasn't done publicly, and decisions were just kind of made. Now, look, this is how politics works. This is how governance sometimes works. Decisions have to be made. Tough choices have to be made. But I would argue that when it comes to being a school board member, you are not a politician. That is not how this works. You were elected to serve the public. You were a public servant. And so as a public servant, your job is to follow policy, particularly board policy, both local and legal, and to hire and fire a superintendent, to set a tax rate, and to drive the policy for the school district in the best interest of the students. So what's upsetting, if you follow the social media trend, a lot of parents are angry and they're upset and they have a lot of questions. And so they'll be given an opportunity to give their public forum discussion in a community forum sometime this week. But I hate to say it, it's likely too late. It's likely that these decisions have already been made and that they're going to split up a school district and leave everybody in alert. In a district that had been thriving, a district that was maybe having some struggles, but already a mass exodus of amazing teachers had left the district because the school board changed hands. And a lot of the thinking of this new particular board was not in the best interest of all students and was not in the best interest of all teachers. It's almost like lighting a fire and then wondering why it's set ablaze. Because that's what happened here with this school district dating back a year ago. They set fires, and now they're wondering why they can't put them out.